Chapter 7. It was 7:45 a.m. Earlier in the morning, he was enjoying the warm bath he boiled and forgot about the time. The volunteer teacher, who would be late for the second class, strode and trotted up the slope until he reached the school on the cliff. The students were already lining up, ready for the morning ritual to pay respect to the flag, and singing the Thai national anthem. From what he saw, at least 5 students were missing. He knew that his teaching method was problematic, and perhaps the parents deemed him useless and stopped their children from joining the class. Once the Akka children saw their crude crayon, they readily raised their hands into a Y and said "Savadi" in unison. Tien accepted their greetings in the same gesture, but with his hand on his chest, forcing out a smile even if his heart was wilting inside. Looking around, he spotted 2 unfamiliar rangers patrolling the area. As soon as the hands of a big round wall clock struck number 8, 2 students stepped forward and stood in front of the flagpole. There was no music, no orchestra band, only the sound of rustling leaves in the breeze that was creating a natural melody that only a few were lucky enough to hear. Tien stood by the bamboo flagpole, raking his eyes over the children in this remote area who were singing the Thai national anthem in harmony. Yet he just stood still, swallowing thickly, the thin lips opening, but it was only a soft huff that came out. He didn't know since when the new generation started believing that they should have been ashamed of showing respect for the nation's highest institution. But here, there was no one to judge him. Unexpectedly, the deep voice of a young man who always skipped this morning ritual at school rang out and blended in with those of his students. The faded, run-down flag was pulled with a rusty pulley to the top of the pole, and waved above everything else on this fairway land at the edge of this country. He couldn't explain how he felt after the anthem ended. All he knew was a heavy bolt in his mind had been unlocked, and he wanted to laugh out loud. Tien took in a deep breath as he came to a decision. He walked towards the kids, one step closer, and said in a loud, clear voice, "From this day onward, I'd like everyone to call me P. Tien." The city boys scanned the children's faces as they fell into a complete silence before staring back at him with a puzzled look on their faces. He suddenly felt disheartened. "P, that means a big brother or sister. You guys know the word, right?"
"Why aren't you a teacher when you're our teacher?"
Miyu, whose big brother didn't come to the class today, asked the question that seemed to be on everyone's mind. Because this teacher didn't have what it took to be a teacher. He didn't know how to organize the class or plan the instructions. He didn't know how to approach the children. Hearing them call him a teacher only emphasized the fact that he was useless. The only reason he lasted this long was because of his pure stubbornness. Tien gave them a sheepish smile, an honest answer. "I'd like everyone to be my younger sister and brother. Can I be your big brother?" The kids cocked their heads in bewilderment, yet they nodded in agreement.
"Yes, P. Crayon."
The man who had asked to be downgraded from being a teacher to being a brother let out a heavy sigh before leading the students into the classroom. He later found out that the previous teacher had focused mostly on spelling the words in Thai language and minimally on the English. The children only learned how to cite A to C. Tien had been up almost all night and made up his mind at 2 a.m. that even if he wasn't a replacement for a real teacher, he could try his own method, starting with the subject he did best. A slender hand was scribbling the Arabic numerals with Thai pronunciation, and he asked, "Can you read all these numbers for me?" Even if the students made some mistakes, he learned that they had been taught some basics. Next, he wrote down a simple addition exercise for them to solve, and almost everyone failed. So, they could read the numerals but didn't know how to calculate. The novice teacher scratched the back of his neck, pondering. He called everyone to gather around as he sat down cross-legged in front of them and lifted his 2 hands up. These 2 hands have 10 fingers. He counted 1 to 10 as a demonstration, then balled one hand into a fist and stuck the index finger out. This is number 1. He put the other one alongside the first. Put another finger with it. Now how many fingers do we have? The hill tribe children who saw 2 index fingers answered at the same time. 2. Tien stretched 3 fingers on his right hand and 2 from the left, putting them together. And now? 5. The children's voices became more confident, and he felt relieved. Putting things together is called addition. The city boy pointed to the mini cross symbol on the blackboard and asked a new question. If there are 5 fingers like this. He held up his right hand and bent down 2 fingers. How many have we got left?
3.
Tien smiled to himself, happy, and toughened up the question by lifting up all 10 fingers. Now I have 10. He pulled down the pinky and the ring fingers. 2 are missing, and we have
8.
The quick and correct answer prompted him to clap his hands for the children's quick-wittedness, even if they were so underprivileged in all ways imaginable. He rose to his feet and walked back to the blackboard to make the exercise a little easier. All right, if you can give the correct answer to all these questions, I have a reward for you in the afternoon. The loud cheer in the classroom drew the 2 patrolling rangers to turn and look with curiosity. They saw how the children were counting their fingers in amusement. Some even lifted their feet to add up, and everyone laughed. The young man's fair skin, his radiant face, and the colorful clothes he wore made Tien stood out like a sore thumb. Even if they had heard about him from Sergeant Jod and other pals who had met the new volunteer teacher, it wasn't like meeting him in person. Tien radiated the air of being born with a silver spoon, and that made them wonder what he was doing in an outback like this. Even the people with the strongest ideology who came here had to pack their bags and left within the first month that the company had started placing bets for fun on how long a teacher could last. Still, less than 3 hours later, the special young man blended in as a part of the simple scene. The 2 rangers looked at each other and laughed. Perhaps they had to place a new bet on the guy, that he managed to complete his 3 months term because they might just win. 3 days later, the Akka kids still got excited over P. Crayon's rewards because whenever there was a break, they would be folding pieces of leftover papers into birds of varying sizes. At first, Tien had wanted to do the bird origami and give the kids as rewards, but once they had repeatedly asked him to teach them how to make one, he couldn't resist. Now there was a family of paper birds scattering all over the floor. He asked Kama Binglei for a plastic jar to put them in. He was having lunch with the kids, eating from the food carrier that the village master had asked the rangers to bring him every day. It had been days since he didn't see Aji, and he wondered if he had upset the boy since he seemed to adore crude Thorfinn. Miju, why doesn't Piachi come to class with you? He walked to sit down next to the little girl who was rolling a bowl of sticky rice and ate it with a piece of dry beef.
Dad's having back pain, so Piachi has to work the field for him.
But he was just a boy. Why did he have to take on an adult's job? Tien didn't know how to respond. It must be tiring for him. Miju shook her head, smiling proudly.
It is, but we have the rice to eat. My mom told me. I help them plucking tea leaves, too.
The innocent words coming from an 8-year-old girl that expressed her honest feelings made him choke up inside, thinking about himself when he was her age. He was throwing snacks to kill his time, didn't finish his meals, and it had been thrown away and had tons of console games from overseas. It was a life of incomparable luxury. But why had he never been happy and never had a beautiful smile like this little girl has? Tien rose to his feet and pretended to stretch languidly, looking out the window. The sky was cloudy and the sun wasn't strong. The cool breeze that brushed against his face made him want to wander around the village. "All right, everyone." He clapped his hand to draw the students' attention. "This afternoon, we'll go on a field trip in the English language. Let's pack and get moving." 10 pairs of eyes were staring at P. Crayon with confusion. The city boy groaned as something came to him, and he used a simpler word. "We're taking a walk and studying English." The kids jumped up and cheered. He realized there wasn't really a big difference between city and rural children. They were all happy not to be confined in a classroom. He shrugged. Well, who wouldn't be happy? Even a teacher like him didn't want to get stuck in a box, and no wonder that the children would prefer to have a chance to play outside. Once the rangers saw the teacher and a dozen students march out, they rushed in to ask, "Where are you going, teacher?" "We're going to take a stroll around the village. The weather is nice and it's not sunny." The 2 young soldiers exchanged a look, and one of them said, "Please, stay inside the village territory. There's nothing around here but the forest." Tien saw no reason to disagree and nodded in compliance. The Akka kids led their crew Crayon along the route on the ridge, passing through a tea plantation on the land that the government had given them so they could sustain a living. As they ambled around the area, Tien pointed at the surrounding and taught the children to say the words in English, from the sun, the sky, to the cloud. On the hills, he heard noises from radio communication and the children's native dialect floating in the wind, and realized that the 2 rangers were following them in the distance to watch their backs. Finally, the field trip group arrived at the biggest cascading tea plantation that rolled down the mountain slope. Many children said their houses were in the area, so Tien allowed them to go home. He was now left with just a few students.
How do you call this in English?
Miju asked about the tea, eager to learn. T-E-A, tea. He spelled the word for her, knowing that the previous teachers had already taught them the Thai and Latin alphabets. Tien strolled further in between the rows of tea plants before the students had told him it was a shortcut that led to the village's main road. He waved goodbye to the other 3 children who left until it was just Miju and him. "Where do you live?" he asked the girl who cheerily trotted in front of him.
"Over there."
She pointed over the plantation at the foot of the hill nearby with her tiny fingers. "I'll walk you home." Miju clapped her hands cheerfully before turning towards a truck and a crowd near the plantation, next to the dirt road. The Akka girl's eyes grew wide as if she was seeing someone she knew and pulled her teacher's hand.
"Ada, Amma, it's my mom and dad over there."
Tien half jogged as he was being dragged towards the crowd. He noticed how a boy in the hill tribe costume was lifting sacks and placed them neatly one by one at the back of the truck while some 5 to 6 people in city clothes stood by. Aji, who had dirt on his face, turned towards his sister as she approached him with the teacher and lifted his hand into a vai. The other adults went on discussing through an interpreter who spoke Thai and Hani language, Akka's native dialect. "Hey, what are these people doing here?" he asked the student who had been absent from his class for a few days.
"They're buying dried tea from us."
Tien hummed in acknowledgement and took a step closer to look. The villagers took the sacks full of dried tea leaves, the opening stitch close, and put them on the scale to weigh before stacking them up on the truck that belonged to the middleman. 4 kilograms. He heard an announcement before the sack was lifted from the weighing scale. He frowned, unsure why he was seeing number 5 for the measurement. When the other sacks were weighed, the numbers remained the same despite the varying weights. He looked at the Aka man, who acted as a witness and remained impassive, and turned to Aji. Do you guys know how much grams are there in 1 kilogram, or the difference between number 4 and 5? Aji acted as if he was hearing an alien language. What kilogram? Kilogram is a weight measurement. Thien pointed to the weighing scale. That equipment uses this measurement unit. Unit? Thien wanted to pull his hair and let out a heavy sigh before changing the question. How do you guys buy and sell in general? The boy scratched his head, trying to find an answer. They come to buy and we sell them in sacks. What about the payment? They give us the money that matches the numbers in the receipt. Aji turned towards the city man who was holding a weight notebook in his hand. It means... They didn't realize they were being deceived. He bit his lips before blurting out that he knew what these merchants were up to. These conmen cheated on the villagers because there was no one knowledgeable on their side. Thien stepped towards the man who pronounced the measurement number as the last tea sack was placed on the scale. 4 kilos? 5 kilos, 2 grams. The scribe halted as he heard the shout and looked up at the tall, lean, young, handsome man in a modern jacket who stuck out like a sore thumb. Who the fuck are you? Someone who knows the difference between numbers 4 and 5. Thien thrusted his hand towards the notebook, wanting to look inside and not caring if he would offend anyone. Can I have a look? The weight announcer shut the book and glared hotly at the younger man. You're not the seller, and you have no business around here, so fuck off. The man waved dismissively at him, but the son of a former general wouldn't back down. If you can't let me see it, it means you're cheating. What the fuck did you just say? Are you calling us cheaters? We pay 80 baht per kilo, and these sacks weigh 4 kilos each. Do the math. The merchant scribe waved the notebook to show that he had everything written down, yet he didn't let Thien see it. I saw with my own eyes that each sack weighed more than 5 kilos, and you said it was just 4. There was no reason to be nice when they were being nasty. You want to fuck with us, punk? Are you having a death wish? When they saw that the younger man didn't back down, they resorted to scare tactics, but it didn't work on a fighter like Thien. He scoffed and stepped forward to lift the sack from the ground and put it on the scale as the people who heard the noises started to gather. All eyes were on him. See? It's 5 kilos. Or maybe you're so fucking illiterate. I'm a volunteer teacher here, so you can come to my class anytime you like. I'll teach you myself. The man who worked for the city merchant's mouth fell open as the punk rubbed him in the face. The big boss, who everyone referred to as Master Sakta, approached them as soon as he finished paying the hill tribe. What's going on here? Thien looked at the intervener. Judging from the chubby figure and the wealthy appearance, this old man must have been the big boss. These sacks' weight didn't match the price you pay. Master Sakta sneered and started busting balls in return. We pay what we've written down. He took the notebook from his man and opened it. See? It's written 4 kilos per sack right here. The sellers have agreed on their numbers and never had any problems. But you, an outsider, why are you sticking your nose in our business? The statement translated as, back the fuck off. Thien balled his hands into fists and looked at the hill tribe's innocent faces, feeling angered on their behalf. How could someone cheat on such poor, hard-working people for just 100 or 1,000 baht? The lean form whipped around and Thien paced towards the back of the truck. He jumped up there to count all the sacks and turned to count the few remaining ones on the ground. He then approached the Akka man who held a receipt from the middleman. May I? He didn't wait for permission and plucked the receipt and the money from the rough hand to count. 23 sacks, 80 baht per kilo and 5 kilos per sack. That makes 9,200 baht. What is this? He lifted the money and furiously shouted, 7,300 baht. You even took out 60 baht as transportation cost. This isn't just cheating. This is dirty con. Watch your mouth, punk. I paid for what's written on the receipt. You're accusing me without any proof. I'm going to call the police to charge you with defamation. The chubby rich guy said vehemently, trying to find his way out. Thien sneered as he knew he was having an upper hand and fetched the cell phone that had ran out of battery in a mock threat. Let's weigh all the sacks again then. I'm going to take a picture of each sack to have a proof. Then we go to the police station. Master Sakta gritted his teeth. This punk was too smart and too fearless, unlike the previous volunteer teachers who had tried to help the villagers, but left with their tails tucked between their legs as soon as he threatened them. It seems he had to use extreme measures. Are you taking the money or not? Put the hands on his hips, shouting at the Akka villagers, and the interpreter hurriedly translated the sentence. The man who appeared to be Meju and Aji's father, as the children were clinging to his waist, looked back and forth between the two quarreling parties, not knowing what to do. From what his son had told him with a rough translation, he guessed that he was being duped and the teacher was fighting for him. Give him 1,840 baht more, or you can take 40 baht out as the gasoline cost. Thien cocked his eyebrows in mockery, making the other man even more furious. This conversation is stupid. Don't take anything at all then. Boys, take the sacks down and crush them to pieces. The boss shouted his order for everyone to hear. His men started throwing the sacks down and the stitches broke open. Dried tea leaves were spilling out across the ground. Worse, they jumped down and stomped on the sacks with their feet. The villagers who saw how their products were being destroyed rushed in to stop the men. Thien's face turned red and he swung his fist and hit the nearest man, sending the guy backward. When the other men saw that one of them was hurt, they jumped in and fist fight broke out. Suddenly, the sound of gunshot rang out across the area. The chaos came to a sudden halt as 10 armored men in patrolling uniforms and bulletproof vests stepped in to stop the fight. The soldiers separated the fighting men by pulling them apart. Captain Fufa, who was carrying an M16 rifle that he had shot on the ground, silently stared at the fearless teacher. His intense eyes subjugated and intimidated even the hardened men. But they didn't work with Thien, as the younger man with the bruised face raised his chin in defiance. You caught the smoke real quick, Captain. You still have the gut to talk. What would have happened if I didn't show up on time, huh? He was taking his men to patrol Pha Pon Dao area when the rangers radioed him about the fight, and fortunately he made it before anyone could get seriously hurt. Why are you blaming me? Why don't you arrest these shameless cheaters? He pointed to the rich man and the men who seemed to be just as bruised as him. Cheating is cheating, fighting is fighting. What if they were armed? What were you going to do? You could have started a fight that led to your death for nothing. And the villagers would be in bigger trouble. You want me to stand and watch these goons steal from the villagers? Or waited for some officials to step in? Maybe in the next life. Seeing how Thien was relentlessly arguing with him and didn't realize his own grave mistakes, Fufa snapped. He snatched the thin wrist and yanked the younger man towards him, grumbling in a low, chilling voice. Thien, you're a smart boy. You know there are other ways to deal with these people that doesn't require a brute force. The thin lips opened as if to retort, but the intense stare that was shown with disappointment made him shut up and press his lips. No matter what I did, I couldn't do anything right, could I? Thien jerked his arm free from the captain's grasp and walked away without saying another word. Fufa watched him leave with a heavy heart, staring at Thien's slender back, being at his wits' end. He then ordered the 2 rangers to follow the teacher back to his accommodations so he could deal with this mess that the brat had started and stop things from getting worse. The light from the lamp illuminated the tiny hut as the lean form in a wrinkled t-shirt and soft boxers lay face down in the old mattress under the new white mosquito net that was rolled up to rest on the top. Thin legs kicked back and forth in the air as he flipped the little handmade notebook that held a tale of a woman who had given him a second life. Thien sighed heavily, exhausted. The first week when Thorfinn had been here, she woke up at dawn to help the villagers pick up tea leaves, and she had enjoyed the experience. What about him? He started a fight and ended up destroying their products. Why am I comparing myself to her? Before coming back home, he stopped by Kama Binglei's house, wanting to tell him about the incident. He found out that the village master had gone to downtown Qinghai since morning for a meeting and hadn't returned. Perhaps the merchants knew about his schedule, and there would be no one protecting the villagers' interest, and came to take advantage of that. The city boy closed the pastel diary, having enough, and threw it back into his backpack. He rolled on his back out of habit, and pain shot through his body. Even if there wasn't any mirror to check in the bathroom, the pang in his mouth and torso was pronouncing his injuries too well. He wondered how the soldiers took care of the situation after he left. Was he angry? He thought about the captain's dark and furious expression, and guilt gripped on his heart. Yet he was too stubborn to admit his fault. Thien looked at the clock. It was already 10:30 p.m. He should have gone to bed, but he couldn't sleep. The younger man rose to his feet and walked out into the narrow balcony in front of the hut and sat down. He let the cold wind wash over him and looked at the stars. Not too far away, on the rough dirt track that served as the villagers' main commune road, a stay-at-home mom motorcycle was riding in the dark towards the teacher's accommodation that stood at the end. The tall, massive figure parked the vehicle and killed the engine under the same tree he did the last time, and fetched a plastic bag along with a sporty traveling bag from the front basket. He headed towards the small hut that was still lit in this late hour and jumped a little when he saw a dark, obscured, hunched figure sitting on the balcony near the door. "Why are you feeding the mosquitoes in the dark?" he said, and went on with the next sentence that earned him a glare. "Or are you waiting for me? Are you drunk? Why are you talking crap?" Thien pretended to be exasperated, even if the captain was half spot on. Fufa, who was wearing his nightgown, pants and camouflage jacket, and rode the motorbike through wind, started climbing up the short stairs and handed the younger man the plastic bag. "Here's a salve and healing balm from the bruises. I've asked for some from the doc." Actually, the said doc had pleaded to see Thien and checked up on him, but the captain ran off before he could join. "Can you give him my thanks?" Thien reached out for the bag, but the captain didn't let go. "What about me?" Fufa's eyes fixated on the younger man, and Thien realized that it wasn't just a thank you for the medicine, but also for how the officer had taken care of the mess he'd created in the afternoon. He looked down and muttered lowly, "Thank you. When you're looking for troubles, perhaps you can behave better, just like you do now. You came here to taunt me?" The crestfallen boy became frustrated again. Thien yanked the bag from the captain's hand, but the other man yanked it back and nearly tore it open. "Can you see your own back? Go inside. I'm going to put the balm on you." The tall figure didn't wait for the answer and disappeared behind the door. The injured young man's mouth fell open as he jumped up and followed suit. No, I can do it. You can go home now. Fufa turned and looked at the glowing face. Did I say that I'm going to leave now? Don't tell me you're staying over. Yeah, I am. You made a big mess, and we don't know if those men will return to take revenge tonight. He didn't tell the younger man how Master Sakta and his men had announced their vengeance plan before the soldiers made them leave. If they come, what can you do? You're here by yourself. Tien sneered, but immediately shut up as the officer lifted the hem of his shirt to reveal a handgun tugged at the belt. I've ordered the men to toughen up the security around the village in the next few days. The Lionheart teacher felt the breath catch up in his lungs, realizing how his reckless behavior had put so many people in trouble. He walked to his backpack, pulled out an envelope with a wad of cash, and handed it to the captain. This is the money from the merchants. I've taken it before the fight broke out. And this is from me. It might not be much, but it's all I have. Could you tell the villagers that I'm sorry for damaging their products? Captain Fufa took the amount that belonged to Master Sakta. You can keep your money. Actually, they've asked me to thank you for dealing with the cheaters on their behalf, he said grimly, closing his hand over the slender one that was holding the cash. Will you promise me you won't be reckless again? If something happens to you, you know someone will be so worried about you. Are you talking about you? Tien shook his head, trying to quell the blushing that was creeping up on his cheeks and turning them red. I know. Come on. Let's put on the bomb on me. I want to go to bed already. He changed the topic to avoid the awkward subject that was shaking his heart, only to realize that he had just made it worse. Strip and sit down. He froze, hearing the order. What? Are you? I'm going to put the salve on you. What do you think I'm going to do? Fufa frowned at him and took a step closer, as if he was to help the spoiled child take off the t-shirt. I can do it myself, the young man protested and whipped around, turning his back to the captain. He held his breath as he pulled the t-shirt over his head and slowly sat down in a cross-legged position, frustrated. The young officer sat down and raked his eyes over the once smooth back that turned black and blue as if someone had splashed paint on it. He shook his head in exasperation at Tien's youthful hot-headedness and squeezed the tube. Rough, thick fingers rubbed the pungent gel on the bruises, and Tien cried out a protest. Hey, easy! This is human skin, not a wood plank to file. You weren't scared of getting hurt when you started the fight. Fufa kneaded the salve until it absorbed into the skin, not being too gentle. The man who was teased bit his lips, frustrated that he couldn't win this round, and let out a soft whine of protest once in a while. When the captain finished rubbing the ointment all over his back, he ordered him to turn around, and Tien immediately said no. What? No! I can see my own torso. I'll do it myself. Stop making a fuss. My hand is already messy, so let me finish the job. Fufa didn't relent, grabbing the lean arm with tight muscles and spun the other man to face him in an awkward position. Tien was pressing the shirt tightly to his chest as if he was afraid that the captain would sexually assault him. Please, not here. You can help me with the other spots. Tien kept his eyes shut and raised his chin so the captain could see that the corner of his lips and cheeks were also black and blue. You're embarrassed. Suddenly the image of something he'd seen at the waterfall popped in his mind before the words slipped out. Perhaps the boy didn't want him to see the long gash on his chest. Fufa shook his head. He had scars across his body, and he wasn't afraid that someone would see them. Wealthy people were so hard to understand. Put on the shirt so you don't catch a cold. The cautious guy whipped around and hurriedly put the shirt on, feeling relieved. He then turned back to get more balm without any protest. "Are the bruises bad?" He pointed at his face because there was no mirror to check. The young captain smiled, squeezing the gel tube. "Why? You're afraid you're not too pretty anymore?" "I am afraid, of course. I spat blood when I was brushing my teeth." "You're still attractive. But if you get more bruises, I can't promise you'll be able to keep your look." He chuckled lowly as Thien bared his fangs at him. Coarse fingers moved to gingerly rub the balm on the smooth cheek. It was such a shame that it was now marred by bruises. Thien slowly opened his eyes and was staring right at the captain. They saw each other's reflections in their irises, and the world stood still. Fufa lifted his hand to tip Thien's smooth chin. Thin, rosy lips slowly parted as if to invite the other man to come closer. The captain leaned in until the tips of their noses touched, and suddenly both men jumped apart as if being electrified. Thien cleared his throat and scratched his head to chase away the embarrassment until his hair became disheveled. What the heck just happened? He rose to his feet and pulled down the tips of the net before sitting down on the mattress to calm down for a few seconds. Outside the net, the normally impassive officer was rubbing his face, being as confused, and heard a faint voice from the net. "Are you spending the night here? Hurry up and come on in. My eyes are closing." He wasn't going to act like a virginal teen girl. He was a grown man, and the captain was also a man. Even if he wasn't so sure about the poker face officer's sexual preference. But who knows how much willpower he had to muster to finish the sentence. The light from the kerosene lamp slowly dimmed as if to answer his words. Thien lay down and turned on his side with his back to the captain as soon as the tall, muscular form lifted the tip of the net and got inside. Even if the mattress was small, they still managed to create a gap between them. Fufa rolled on his side and rested on his arm instead of a pillow. The silence that came from the man who was always argumentative felt eerie. "Thien, what did you have for dinner?" He wanted to slap his mouth for the stupid conversation starter. "Uncle Biangle gave me stir-fried kale and jasmine rice. I was going to make fire and boil the water to bathe, so I made an omelette." The smooth voice that came up behind him sounded happy. The boy must have been proud of himself. "Haven't you burned it into charcoal and thrown it in the bin?" "That was rude. Of course, I burned the edges, but that's still progress." The novice chef argued vehemently, forgetting the awkwardness between them. "I want to see it for myself in the morning." "No way." "I have a class to attend. It's hard enough to get up in the morning and make the hot bath." After the low whine ended, Fufa rolled around and said in the most neutral tone he could muster, even if he wanted to burst out laughing. "Thien, tomorrow is Saturday. No kids will be at your class." "What?" The hard-working volunteer teacher sprang up into a sitting position and fumbled for the wristwatch he had placed next to the rectangular pillow. His eyes widened as he looked at the tiny letters on the watch's face. Fry. So tomorrow would be Saturday. It meant a day off, finally. Thien's smile split across his face, and he dropped heavily on the mattress, lying on his face, and turned towards the uninvited guest. "So I don't have to go to bed now? What are you going to do then?" Thien's mischievous brown eyes rolled as if cogs were working before looking at the man next to him with a glint. "I'm talking to you. You said you were sleepy, didn't you? Now I'm full awake." Fufa went quiet and pointed at his lips. "Read my lips. I am sleepy." He emphasized each word and dismissively turned his back to the other man, leaving Thien speechless. "How dare you say no to me?" he snapped, and shook the officer's muscular body that lay so still like a log. It wasn't long before the young man fell asleep himself. Yet the slender hand still clutched at the camouflage jacket and didn't let go. The young captain smiled even if his eyes were closed. He was a deep sleeper who had never been disturbed by dreams before, but tonight he knew he would have a good one.